just things that are so much, 3,000 level class bourbon things that you don't really know unless you devote a lot of time and energy to learning them.
A minute ago, you were talking about flavor notes and how it was created. You were mentioning this back when you went to Nashville to Tennessee to learn, or, sorry, Kentucky to start the process. Before you started the process, what was your level of knowledge with bourbon? And I'm assuming you had to go much deeper, but are you surprised, or is there anything you're learning yourself as a whiskey brand owner that you just either never realized, or you're getting deeper into that knowledge, or what's that adventure like for you?
Yeah. So I candidly, when I came up with the idea, I actually preferred Scotch, to be honest. I like the sweeter, lighter characteristics of it. When we looked at it, imports coming across the sea, okay, let's go with something domestic. What about bourbon? So I knew next to nothing about bourbon. I knew that there was, I knew Maker's Mark and Wild Turkey and, something called a Woodford. But I really didn't have a depth of knowledge in it. So I went to Netflix. I watched there's a bourbon documentary on there. I got in deep into YouTube and then started attending a few shows, some whiskey festivals. As my basis of knowledge, this is before we went to Kentucky. This is before we did anything, just so I would even know what questions to ask. Because it's people think that bourbon has to be from Kentucky. And the truth is it doesn't. All you need is it has to be made in America. It needs to be at least 51% corn in the mash bill, which is the minimum. Most have about 70 plus. You need to have 2 years in a new charred oakwood barrel. You can't use used barrels for your initial aging of your bourbon. And that's really it. It has to have, they're usually mixed with wheat or rye or malted barley or they're in the mash bill, but it could be a corn and a wheat. It could be corn, wheat, malted barley, corn, rye, wheat, however you want to mix all those up, but that's all bourbon is. And so just with that basis of knowledge, I think puts you ahead of a lot of the consumers. And I'm still learning things about bourbon that I don't know. We partner with Bardstown Bourbon Company. Mm-hmm. And every time I'm on the phone with those guys, I learn something new. Huh. About the rick house, about where different barrels need to be in the rick house to gather different characteristics, and how they age differently depending on what floor and position that they're at in the rick house. Those are just things that are so much, 3,000 level class bourbon things that you don't really know unless you devote a lot of time and energy to learning them.
It's very well said. I'll use the correlation of wine, which is, for me, I love wine for two entirely different reasons. One is the taste profile all by itself, but in addition to that, it's the food and wine pairing. And I'm assuming you've had some good wine and good food in your time. And so just how much an amazing wine can bring out the flavor of everything else. Mm-hmm. And I feel like bourbon has that same opportunity, but just all the different levels of profiles, it's just, and the aromas they can pull out. So you're on a really fun journey. I'll be curious where it takes you next.
Yeah. And the wine, I feel like wine and bourbon have a lot of parallels. I agree with you there. It's something, I've spent so much time on bourbon. I have really lacked on my wine knowledge. With my girlfriend now, she's a big wine person. So she's trying to teach me about the different grapes and stuff now, but it's definitely a fun thing and something you can toy around with and have fun while you're doing it.
You already know I'm a fan. So people are watching, they're listening. where can we find more? Where can we find you on social media? Where can we find you online? And more importantly, is where can we buy you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, it's just Hand Barrel Bourbon, and online www.handbarrel.com. We ship to 37, 38 states, so you can order online.